Good morning, everyone. Today we are in Ezekiel chapter 17. And in this chapter, we have a parable that is being given, or we have a story that is being told. And it's going to be the parable of the two eagles and the vine. And God is going to use this to illustrate to his people the situation that they are going to find themselves in. And so, as you go through and you read, a lot of the information that is going to be given is going to be somewhat hidden, not completely hidden, but somewhat hidden. And the reason I say somewhat hidden is because if you just go through and you read the parable, you sit back and you say, what in the world is he talking about? What is he trying to get across? But this is another of those situations where if you will allow the Bible to be its own interpreter instead of trying to figure it out all by yourself, then you will be able to see just exactly what it is that is being discussed, because God will tell you what it is that he means. And so when you get down to verse 11 in chapter 17, God is going to lay out the meaning of the text. So what we're going to do today is we're actually going to go through and somewhat side by side what it is that is being discussed with what it is that God says he is talking about. At the start of the parable in chapter 17, you have this eagle. And this eagle has large wings, long pinions, he's full of feathers, and he comes to Lebanon and he takes from the cedar the highest branch. He takes its topmost young twig, he carries it to a land of trade, and he sets it in a city of merchants. And so that is the first carrying away. You go down to verse 11 and he says that this eagle is Babylon. And he goes to Jerusalem, takes its king and princes, and leads them with him to Babylon. This is what we see in the days of Daniel. When Daniel and his companions are going to be taken from Jerusalem, they're going to be taken to Babylon. They are going to be heavily established and entrenched in the culture and in the palace in Babylon. Remember, Daniel is going to rise all the way to being one of the governors at the second level of authority in all the nation of Babylon. And so they are going to become strong. They are going to prosper. They are going to be able to serve and to truly grow in the location where they are planted. And so that's the first part of this. But then he says that the eagle also, in verse number 5, took some of the seed of the land and planted it in a fertile field, placed it by abundant waters, and set it like a willow tree. And it grew and became a spreading vine of low stature. So there is then this planting of this seed. Now this seed is from the cedar of Lebanon. This is from a marvelous tree. But what grows is not a marvelous tree, but instead a low vine, or a vine of low stature. And it brings forth branches and it brings forth shoots. But it doesn't become this great tree. This is going to be King Zedekiah. Zedekiah is going to grow, he's going to be made king by King Nebuchadnezzar of Babylon. But then he's going to, verse 13 says, he took the king's offspring, made a covenant with him, and put him under oath. He also took away the mighty of the land, that the kingdom might be brought low and not lift up itself, but that by keeping his covenant it might stand. But he rebelled. We're then introduced to the second eagle. The second eagle in this picture is Egypt, as we see in verse number 15. Egypt is the other powerhouse country at this particular time. When Zedekiah takes the throne, Zedekiah starts flirting with Egypt, because he does not want to be under Babylon's thumb. He does not want to be under Nebuchadnezzar's rule. He is going to turn to Egypt for deliverance. And we've seen a little bit about this in the previous chapter as well, and it's heavily discussed in the latter stages of the book of Jeremiah. Zedekiah is going to rebel. He's going to break the oath that he made in order to be the ruler of Judah to begin with. And he is going to begin to sell his allegiance to Egypt. And you're going to have this statement. He says, will this thrive? And it won't, because it's actually going two different directions. And if it starts one way and it moves back the other, the roots begin to shift, they begin to move, they never get deep. And as he puts it, the wind will just be able to pick it up and destroy it and wither it away. Zedekiah is not going to prosper. As a matter of fact, Zedekiah is going to be destroyed because of it. And God says in verse 16, as I live, surely in the place where the king dwells, who made him king, whose oath he despised, and whose covenant he broke, with him in the midst of Babylon he shall die. Nor will Pharaoh with his mighty army and great company do anything in the war, when they heap up a siege mound and build a wall to cut off many persons. Since he despised the oath by breaking the covenant, and in fact gave his hand, and still did all these things, he shall not escape. Zedekiah made a promise. Zedekiah, in order to be made king of Judah by Nebuchadnezzar, had given Nebuchadnezzar an oath of loyalty, and he broke it. And because he broke his oath to Babylon, God says Egypt will not be there when Zedekiah needs them, when Nebuchadnezzar comes and lays his siege to Jerusalem. Zedekiah proved himself untrustworthy. Zedekiah proved that his word meant nothing. And as such, Zedekiah was going to face great punishment from Nebuchadnezzar for his rebellion. But there's one more factor to this particular account in chapter 17. And I want to take just a moment to notice it as well. When you drop down to verse 22, he says, thus says the Lord God, I will also take one of the highest branches of the high cedar and set it out. I will crop off from the topmost of its young twigs a tender one, and will plant it on a high and prominent mountain. On the mountain height of Israel I will plant it, and it will bring forth boughs and bear fruit and be a majestic cedar. Under it will dwell birds of every sort. In the shadow of its branches they will dwell. Here you have a message that pertains to the remnant that would return, that God is going to replant in Israel. He is going to plant from the best, and it's going to bring the best, that it will be a majestic cedar. This is not simply going to be a short vine, but rather it will grow into a great tree. Now, there is also a sense of foreshadowing. There is a sense of looking forward to the time of Christ as well, because you have also the statement in verse number 23 that it will bring forth boughs and bear fruit, be a majestic cedar, and under it will dwell birds of every sort. In the shadow of its branches they will dwell, and all the trees of the field shall know that I, the Lord, have brought down the high tree, exalted the low tree, dried up the green tree, and made the dry tree flourish. Everything will be known to be the work of God. Certainly, when the remnant does return, they are a strong people. They are a strong people spiritually, not just physically. As a matter of fact, by physical numbers, they will not be strong. But in the time to come, everyone will know that God's hand was upon them. These are the lessons of Ezekiel chapter 17. Tomorrow, we will come back and we will look at Ezekiel chapter 18. But until then, I hope you have a great day.